Imagine a world waking up. Not the quick blink of dawn, but a slow, stretching yawn that lasts for centuries. The great ice sheets, which had held much of the planet in a cold embrace for thousands of years, were shrinking, creeping back toward the poles like a reluctant guest. As they melted, they left behind gifts. Vast rivers carving through soft earth, valleys lined with rich, dark soil, and a sun that grew warmer each year, painting the land in new shades of green dot. This was the world 7,000 years before Christ in a place we now call the Indian subcontinent. Here, two rivers mighty, slow-moving giants curved through the plains like silver ribbons. One we still know, the Indus, wide and powerful, carrying water from the Himalayas to the Arabian Sea. The other, the Sarasvati, has vanished now, its bed dry and filled with wind-blown sand. But back then, it was even grander, a super river. Fed by glacial melt, its waters so abundant they could sustain kingdoms. Between these two rivers, in the hills of what is now Baluchistan, Pakistan, something extraordinary was about to happen. A group of people nomads who had spent their lives following herds, sleeping under stars, and gathering wild grains made a decision that would change everything. They stopped walking. Why here? You might wonder, what made this spot among all the places on Earth the cradle of something new? Look closer. The soil here was unlike any other, thick, black, and full of nutrients, left behind by the rivers when they flooded each year. The air was warm, but not too hot, with monsoon rains that came like clockwork, watering the ground just when seeds needed it most. And those rivers, they weren't just sources of water. They were highways, paths that would one day carry goods, ideas, and people across thousands of miles. The first settlers built simple homes, not the tents of their nomad days, but solid structures of mud and brick, huddled together like a family. They learned to shape the earth to their will, digging trenches to guide water to their fields, planting seeds in neat rows, and waiting with the patience only nature teaches for green shoots to break through the soil. They grew wheat and barley, crops that had traveled with traders from the Fertile Crescent far to the west. But they also did something no one else had done. They planted cotton. Think about that for a moment. Cotton, the soft white fiber we take for granted in our t-shirts and sheets, was first tamed here in these small villages. They picked the fluffy bolls, spun the fibers into thread, and wove it into cloth light, breathable, perfect for the poor. Warm climate. It would be 1,000 years before any other civilization figured out how to do this. What do you suppose they thought when they held the first piece of cotton cloth? Maybe they smiled, knowing they'd made something the world had never seen. They didn't stop with plants. These early farmers looked at the animals around them, wild cattle with humps on their backs, goats with shaggy coats, sheep that wandered the hills, and saw partners, not just prey. They learned to herd them, to protect them from wolves, to guide them to good grazing land. In return, the animals gave milk, wool, and help pulling plows. The humped cattle, called zebu, became especially important. They weren't just useful, they became sacred. Their images later carved into seals and pottery as symbols of life and abundance. Life in these villages wasn't all work, though. They found time to create beauty. Women strung beads from turquoise, brought all the way from Central Asia, their fingers deftly threading the blue stones into necklaces that caught the light. Men carved tools from flint and copper, their edges sharp enough to cut grain or shape wood. And when someone died, they buried them with care, laying them to rest with pots of food, beads, and sometimes even tool signs that they believed in an afterlife or at least wanted their loved ones to be comfortable on the journey. But perhaps the most surprising thing about these early settlers was how far they reached out to the world beyond their hills. Archaeologists digging in the ruins of their village called Mehrgar have found shells from the Arabian Sea, hundreds of miles to the south, and chunks of lapis lazuli, a deep blue stone that only comes from the mountains of Afghanistan. How did these things get here? Maybe traders walked for weeks, carrying bundles on their backs. Maybe they swapped goods with other nomads who passed them along like messages. However it happened, it shows that even in these early days, no one was truly isolated. And then, there's the dentistry. Yes, dentistry. Among the skeletons found at Mehrgar, 9 have perfectly round holes in their teeth holes made by flint-tipped drills. What's more, the bone around the holes had healed, which means the people survived the procedure. Can you imagine sitting still while someone drilled into your tooth with a stone tool? It must have hurt, but they knew how to do it carefully. Maybe using herbs to numb the pain and keep the wound clean. This is the oldest evidence of dental surgery in the world. Why would they bother? Perhaps a bad tooth hurt too much to eat, and in a village where food was life, that was a problem. Worth fixing. As the centuries passed, the villages grew. More people arrived, drawn by the rich soil and the safety of living together. The mud brick houses multiplied, spreading out along the hillsides like a patchwork quilt. Potters learned to make better pots, first by hand, pinching and shaping the clay, then later using simple kilns to fire them, turning them hard and waterproof. At first, the pots were plain, but over time, they began to decorate them with patterns, lines and dots and swirls. That would become familiar symbols in the region for thousands of years. By 5,500 years before Christ, something new appeared. The potter's wheel. It was a simple invention, a stone disc that spun on a pivot, but it changed everything. Suddenly, potters could make bowls and jars that were perfectly round, all the same size, as if they'd been copied from a single model. This wasn't just about beauty. It was about efficiency, about making things that could be stacked, stored, and traded easily. It was the first step toward the obsession with standardization that would one day make this civilization famous. Slowly, subtly, a hierarchy began to form. At first, everyone's grave had roughly the same things: a few beads, a pot, maybe a tool. But after a couple of thousand years, some graves held more copper axes, fancier pottery, beads made from rare stones. These weren't kings or queens, exactly. There's no evidence of palaces or thrones. Instead, it seems like wealth was shared among a few families who worked together to lead the village. It was a collective kind of power, not the "I'm in charge" kind we see in so many ancient stories. Who were these people, really? Where did they come from? Geneticists have studied the bones from Mehrgar, and they've found something fascinating. These early settlers were a mix of two groups. Most of their DNA came from farmers who had migrated east from Iran as the climate warmed. But they also had genes from the hunter-gatherers who had lived in the subcontinent for thousands of years, the people who knew the land like the back of their hands. It's as if two stories merged into one, creating something entirely new. And through it all, the climate was their ally. Scientists call this time the Holocene climatic optimum, a period of warm, wet weather that made the deserts of Baluchistan bloom. The Sarasvati River, fed by melting glaciers, was so large it dwarfed the modern Ganges and Indus combined. Satellite images today can still trace its ancient path, a ghostly riverbed stretching from the Himalayas to the sea. This river was the key. It watered fields, carried boats, and connected villages into a network that would one day become an empire. So here, in this quiet corner of the world, the seeds of a civilization were planted, not with a grand proclamation or a mighty battle, but with a decision to stay, to plant, to build, and to care for one another. The people of Mergar didn't know it, but they were starting something that would grow into one of the greatest urban civilizations the world had ever seen. A civilization that would stretch across more land than Egypt and Mesopotamia combined. But that was still a long way off. For now, they were just farmers, herders, potters, and traders, living in mud brick houses, watching their children chase goats, and waiting for the rains to come. And in that waiting, in that ordinary, everyday life, something extraordinary was taking root. The sun rose a little higher over the river plains as the centuries rolled by, and with each passing year, the settlements along the Indus and Sarasvati grew like well-tended gardens. What had once been a handful of mud brick huts at Mergar was now a constellation of villages, each one reaching out to the next, their fields merging into a green sea of wheat and barley. By 4,000 years before Christ, something new was stirring village life, was giving way to something bigger, something more complex. This was the age when roots dug deeper and innovation began to branch out in unexpected directions. Have you ever watched a small town grow into a city? It doesn't happen overnight. One house becomes two, then a dozen. A market spring up where farmers trade their crops. A skilled potter sets up a workshop, and soon others follow, each specializing in something different. That's exactly what happened here. Villages like Nausharo and Pirak, once isolated, started to connect, sharing ideas, tools, and traditions until they felt like part of a single, sprawling community. Pottery tells the story of this change better than anything. In the early days, pots were simple hand-shaped, fired in basic kilns, their surfaces plain or decorated with just a few scratches. But by 3,800 years before Christ, something remarkable happened. Potters began painting their vessels with bold, geometric patterns, zigzags, crosses, circles that overlapped like ripples in water. These weren't just random designs. They appeared again and again, in villages hundreds of miles apart, as if the potters were speaking a secret language with their brushes. A pot from Nausharo, with its red and black stripes, could have been made in Pirak, so similar were their styles. This wasn't coincidence. It was culture shared, understood, felt across distances. Why did these patterns matter? Think of them as early logos or family crests. They might have marked which group a pot belonged to, or what it was used for: a storage jar for grain, a bowl for rituals, a cup for daily meals. Whatever their meaning, they showed that people were thinking beyond their own village. They cared about being part of something larger. But pottery wasn't the only thing changing. Tools were getting sharper, stronger, and more precise. Stone, which had served humanity for millennia, was slowly giving way to metal. At first, it was just copper soft, malleable, used for simple things like pins and beads. But by 3,500 years before Christ, smiths had learned to mix copper with tin or arsenic, creating bronze, a metal harder than stone, able to hold a sharp edge for cutting grain or shaping wood. Imagine the first time a farmer held a bronze sickle instead of a stone one. It would have felt like magic, lighter, sharper, able to cut through wheat in half the time. No more stopping to sharpen a dull stone. No more broken tools in the middle of harvest. Bronze changed work, making it easier, more efficient. And where there's efficiency, there's time to do more than just survive. Time to create, to trade, to dream. To make bronze, you need more than just metal. You need furnaces hot enough to melt it over 1,000 degrees Celsius. Archaeologists have found the remains of these furnaces, their bricks blackened by fire, in villages across the region. They were simple structures, but they required skill to build and tend. Someone had to gather the right wood for fuel. Someone had to mine the ore. Someone had to shape the metal into tools. This wasn't a one-person job. It took a team, a group of people with different skills, working together. And so, specialists emerged. No longer did everyone have to be a farmer, a potter, and a toolmaker. Some people became full-time smiths, their hands calloused from hammering metal. Others focused on making beads, drilling tiny holes into carnelian stones with such precision that even modern archaeologists marvel. These craftsmen weren't just good at their jobs, they were proud of them. They signed their work, in a way, with distinctive styles that let others know who made it. Quality mattered. A poorly made tool or a lopsided pot wouldn't do. This was about pride, about reputation, about contributing something valuable to the community. As skills grew, so did trade. The turquoise from Central Asia and lapis lazuli from Afghanistan that had trickled into Mehrgar now flowed in greater quantities, along with new treasures. Shells from the Persian Gulf, carved into jewelry. Ivory from elephants in the Eastern. Forests shaped into cones and figurines. Even gold, rare and precious, used to decorate the most special objects. How did these goods travel so far? Picture a merchant with a donkey, loaded down with pots and beads, walking for weeks across deserts and mountains. At each village, he trades a little, rests, then moves on. It's slow, but it works. Over time, these individual journeys weave a network connecting the Indus Valley to lands as far away as Mesopotamia. By 3,200 years before Christ, carnelian beads made in the Indus region are turning up in Sumerian graves, tiny pieces of this growing civilization, buried with kings and queens in distant lands. This trade wasn't just about goods. It was about ideas. A merchant from Mesopotamia might describe the ziggurats he'd seen, and a potter might wonder if she could shape clay into something similar. A traveler from Central Asia might tell stories of how people there herded sheep, and a farmer might try new techniques. Cultures don't exist in bubbles. They leak, they mix, they grow by borrowing from one another. As wealth from trade and craftwork accumulated, some families began to stand out. Their houses were larger, with more rooms and better brickwork. Their graves held more treasures, not just a few beads, but copper axes, multiple pottery vessels, even ornaments made from rare stones. This wasn't equality anymore, but it wasn't kingship either. There's no evidence of palaces or thrones, no inscriptions boasting of conquests. Instead, it seems like several families shared power, working together to make decisions for the good of the community. Think of it like a neighborhood council, but for a whole village. Maybe they met in a large public building, a granary, or a ceremonial hall to discuss when to plant crops, how to repair the irrigation canals, or where to send traders next. This collective leadership was different from the kingdoms emerging in Egypt and Mesopotamia at the same time. Here, power was spread out, like seeds scattered across a field, not gathered into one big pile. Genetics tells us more about who these people were. They were still a mix of the Iranian farmers who'd settled first and the local hunter-gatherers. But now there was a little more diversity. A few people from Central Asia had joined the mix, bringing new ideas and skills. This wasn't invasion or conquest, just slow, steady movement, people marrying into local families, sharing their ways. The result was a population as diverse As the goods in their markets, bound together by shared traditions, the land itself continued to bless them. The Holocene climatic optimum was still in full swing, with monsoons that doused the fields and rivers that ran full all year. The Sarasvati, in particular, was a lifeline, its waters turning arid plains into fertile farmland. Farmers learned to work with the river, building simple canals to carry water to their fields, planting drought-resistant wheat that could survive if the rains were late. They rotated crops, letting some fields rest while others grew, keeping the soil rich and productive. By 3,300 years before Christ, the villages were starting to look like towns. Streets were wider, laid out in rough grids, not just winding paths between huts. There were public spaces, plazas, where people gathered for festivals or markets. Some towns even had what looked like specialized quarters, one area for potters, another for metal workers, another for traders. This wasn't chaos. It was planning, evidence of a community that thought about how it wanted to live. And then there were the symbols. Pottery, tools, and even walls were covered in marks, simple at first, but growing more complex. Some looked like pictures, a fish, a tree, a human figure. Others were abstract, lines, dots, squiggles. No one knows for sure what they meant. Maybe they were potter's marks to show who made a vessel. Maybe they were clan symbols to identify which group someone belonged to. Maybe they were the first stirrings of writing, a way to record trades or tell stories. Whatever they were, they show that people were trying to communicate in ways that outlasted speech, that they wanted their ideas to live on, even after they were gone. So, by the end of this period, the roots of the Indus Valley Civilization were deep and strong. From simple villages had grown towns, connected by trade, shared culture, and a way of life that valued both individual skill and collective effort. The people here weren't just farmers anymore. They were craftsmen, traders, leaders, and dreamers. They had learned to innovate, to cooperate, and to reach out to the world beyond their rivers. What they didn't know was that they were standing on the edge of something even bigger. In just a few centuries, these towns would grow into cities, grand, planned, bustling metropolises that would astonish the ancient world. But for now, they were building the foundation, brick by brick, idea by idea. And in that building, they were creating something unique, a civilization that would be known, not for kings or wars, but for its wisdom, its ingenuity, and its commitment to living together in peace. The river winds through the plains like a ribbon unfurling, its waters carrying more than just silt and rain. By 3,300 years before Christ, it carries ideas about how to build, how to trade, how to live together. The villages that once dotted the landscape are growing up, stretching out, merging into something new. This is no longer just a collection of farms. This is the stir of towns, the first sparks of cities. And at the heart of it all is a culture that would come to be known as Hakra, named for the dry riverbed that still holds the secrets of its rise. What makes a town different from a village? You might ask. It's not just size. It's the way people organize themselves, the streets that run straight instead of winding, the buildings that serve the whole community, not just one family. It's the sense that this place matters, that it's worth defending, worth investing in. Nowhere is this clearer than at Kot Diji, perched on a limestone ridge above the Indus. This settlement isn't content with simple mud walls. Its people build a citadel 20 meters high, a giant's castle of baked brick and stone. From a distance, it looks like a natural hill. So well does it blend into the landscape But get closer, and you see the work, the carefully stacked bricks. The towers that jet out like watchful eyes, the gates that can be sealed in an instant. Why build something so grand? Maybe to protect the grain stored in its granaries, or the traders who gather here with their goods. Maybe to say, we are here, and we are not going anywhere. Inside the citadel, life hums with purpose. Potters work in workshops, their wheels, spinning so fast they blur. Smiths hammer bronze into tools, the sound ringing through the streets. Merchants unpack bundles from distant lands, lapis lazuli from Afghanistan, shells from the coast, beads made by craftsmen in villages hundreds of miles away. This isn't just a place to live. It's a hub, a crossroads where the world comes together. Farther east, at Calibangan, another town is writing its own rules. Here, the streets don't meander. They march north to south, east to west, meeting at right angles like the lines on a grid. This isn't an accident. Someone planned this. Someone stood at the center and said, here's where the roads will go. It's a bold idea. Order out of chaos. Imagine walking down one of these streets, your shadow stretching ahead of you, passing houses that all look similar, same size, same brick, same careful design. It's like stepping into a pattern, a rhythm that repeats block after block. At Calibangan, they also build fire altars, rectangular platforms of brick, their edges sharp, their corners aligned with the stars. Priests light fires here, the flames reaching toward the sky, sending smoke signals to the gods. What were they praying for? Maybe for rain, for good harvests, for peace. These altars aren't hidden in a corner. They're in the heart of the town, a reminder that faith binds people together as much as bricks do. But the most remarkable thing about these early towns isn't the walls or the streets. It's the uniformity. Walk from Khatdiji to Calibangan, hundreds of kilometers apart, and you'll find bricks that are the same size, 4 parts long, 2 parts wide, 1 part high. Not roughly the same, exactly the same. It's as if someone handed out a ruler and said, this is how we build. Why does this matter? Think of it as a language. If everyone uses the same brick size, builders can work together, even if they've never met. A brick made in one town fits perfectly with a brick made in another. A wall started by one crew can be finished by another. This isn't just about construction. It's about trust that others will follow the same rules, that the community is bigger than any one village. The potter's wheel, once a novelty, is now a workhorse. Every town has them, spinning so fast they create pots that are identical, same shape, same thickness, same curve of the rim. These aren't just vessels. They're messages. We belong to something larger. A pot from Khatdiji could sit on a shelf in Calibangan, and no one would know the difference. This is culture as a shared language, spoken in clay and stone. Metalworkers, too, join the chorus of standardization. Bronze tools from this era, axes, knives, chisels, are so similar across the region that you'd think they came from the same workshop. Smiths measure twice, cut once, following patterns that have been passed down, not just from father to son, but from town to town. Quality matters. A tool that bends or breaks isn't just useless, it's a failure of pride, a break in the trust. That holds the culture together. Trade, once a trickle, becomes a river. Ships sail down the Indus to the Arabian Sea, carrying pots and tools to Oman and Bahrain. Caravans trek overland to Afghanistan, trading beads for lapis lazuli. At Balakot, a coastal town, fishermen drag in their catch by day, and by night, traders pack their boats with shell ornaments bound for inland markets. This isn't just about getting what you need. It's about connection, about knowing that your neighbors, even those far away, value the same things you do. And then there are the symbols, scratched into pottery, stamped onto clay seals, carved into stone. At first, they're simple. A line, a circle, a squiggle that looks like a fish. But over time, they grow more complex. Some appear again and again, in the same order, as if trying to say something specific. Is this writing? Maybe. Or maybe it's a code away for traders to mark their goods, for priests to record rituals, for leaders to send messages. One seal from this period shows a man sitting cross-legged, surrounded by animals: a tiger, a rhinoceros, a deer. Is he a king, a priest, or just a storyteller, capturing a myth in stone? No one knows for sure. But the fact that similar seals turn up in towns hundreds of miles apart says something. These symbols mean something to everyone. They're a secret handshake, a shared story that doesn't need words. Social life in these towns is changing too. The old ways, where families did everything together, are giving way to specialization. Some people spend all their time making beads, their fingers nimble from years of practice. Others focus on farming, tending fields that feed the whole town. Still others are traders, their minds filled with the prices of spices and metals, their feet calloused from walking. This specialization creates a dance of dependence. A bead maker can't eat beads, so she trades them for grain. A farmer can't make a plow, so he trades wheat for bronze. Everyone needs someone else, and that need weaves the community tighter. There's still inequality. Some houses are bigger. Some families have more beads, but there's no sign of kings or palaces. Power, it seems, is still shared, held by a group of elders or craftsmen who meet in the town square to make decisions. The Hakra people are also learning to manage water, one of the most important skills for a civilization built on rivers. At Dalavira, workers carve reservoirs into the rock, creating basins that catch monsoon rains and store them for the dry season. These aren't just holes in the ground. They're engineering marvels, with sloped sides to prevent erosion, channels to direct water, and overflow pipes to prevent flooding. In a land where rain can be scarce, water is wealth, and sharing it fairly is the key to peace. By 2,800 years before Christ, the region is humming with activity. Over 200 settlements have been found, each one a piece of the puzzle. They share pottery styles, building techniques, even the way they bury their dead. A traveler moving from town to town would feel at home almost anywhere, recognizing the pots, the bricks, the symbols on the seals. This is no longer a collection of tribes. This is a culture, a way of life that stretches across the plains, like a blanket. But why did this happen? What made the Hakra culture so unified? Part of it is the river's highways that carried goods and ideas. Part of it is trade. When you buy and sell with someone, you start to see the world their way. Part of it is fear. When there are threats from outside, people pull together. But most of it, perhaps, is simply that working together works. Life is better when you can trust your neighbor, when you share tools and ideas, when you build something bigger than yourself. As the centuries pass, the towns grow larger, the trade networks wider, the symbols more complex. The first sparks of urban life are catching fire, turning into something that will one day dazzle the world. But for now, it's enough to be part of something new, to lay a brick that will be part of a wall, to carve a symbol that will be understood 100 miles away, to walk down a street that runs straight toward the future. The Hakra culture isn't just building towns. It's building a dream of a civilization where people live in harmony, where order replaces chaos, where the future is something to look forward to. And as the sun sets over the Indus, that dream is starting to take shape, one brick, one street, one shared symbol at a time. The Indus and Sarasvati rivers flow wide and slow now, their currents carrying the weight of a civilization come of age. By 2,600 years before Christ, the towns of the Hakra culture have bloomed into something extraordinary. Cities grand, ordered, humming with life. This is the Golden Age, when the Indus Valley Civilization stretches across 1.3 million square kilometers, a tapestry of urban centers, larger than Egypt and Mesopotamia combined. To stand in one of these cities is to step into a world that feels both ancient and startlingly modern, a place where planning, precision, and care for one another have created something no one had seen before. Have you ever wandered through a city and marveled at how it all fits together? The streets that lead where you need to go, the water that flows when you turn a tap, the markets that have exactly what you're looking for. Now imagine that city built 4,500 years ago, without blueprints or machines, and yet, somehow, it works better than many cities today. That's the magic of Harappa, Mohenjo-daro, and Rakhigarhi, the giants of this age. Take Harappa first, named for the civilization itself. It spreads across 150 hectares, a patchwork of neighborhoods, workshops, and public spaces, all stitched together by streets that run straight as arrows. The main roads are 10 meters wide enough for 2 carts to pass, or a crowd to gather. Smaller lanes branch off them, leading to clusters of houses, each with its own courtyard, well, and bathroom. Yes, bathroom, a luxury many ancient civilizations reserved for kings. But here, even ordinary families have a room with a sloped floor, where waste flows through clay pipes into covered drains beneath the streets. Walk a little farther, and you'll find the granaries, great brick structures with raised floors to keep grain dry. Their walls thick enough to block out heat and rodents. They're not just storage sheds. They're symbols of security, proof that the city plans for the future. Nearby, workshops buzz with activity. Bead makers drill tiny holes into carnelian stones, their hands steady as they create spheres so uniform, a modern archaeologist might mistake them for machine-made. Smiths hammer bronze into axes and knives, each one identical to the last, as if carved from the same mold. But it's Mohenjo-daro, rising from the Indus floodplains, that truly takes your breath. Its name means mound of the dead, but in its prime, it's a mound of life, 35,000. People living in a grid of streets that would make a modern city planner proud. The main avenue runs north to south for over a kilometer, flanked by houses that range from modest, 4 rooms around a courtyard, to spacious, 12 rooms, with a private well and workshop, but none so grand they overshadow their neighbors. There are no palaces, no towering temples, no walls that shout, "Look at me." This is a city built for everyone. At the heart of Mohenjo-daro stands the Great Bath, a rectangular pool 12 meters long, 7 meters wide, lined with bricks so perfectly fitted they seem to melt into one another. Bitumen, a natural tar, seals the joints, making the pool waterproof. Steps lead down into the clear water, and a drain at one end lets it empty and refill. What was it for? Maybe rituals, purification ceremonies, where priests and commoners alike waded in, cleansed body and soul. Maybe it was a place to cool off in the scorching heat, a public park with water instead of grass. Whatever its purpose, it belongs to the city. Not a king, a monument to shared joy, not power. Rakhigarhi, discovered only recently, is even larger, 350 hectares, big enough to hold 100,000 people. Satellite images show its streets spreading like a net, catching the light of the sun, while ground-penetrating radar reveals drains that snaked beneath the city, carrying waste away to the river. This is a megacity by ancient standards, yet it feels intimate neighborhoods with their own wells, local markets, small shrines where families pray. It's proof that size doesn't have to mean chaos. What makes these cities so remarkable isn't just their size, it's the system. Every house connects to a network of drains, clay pipes buried under the streets, sloping gently so water flows without pumps. Rainwater from rooftops, waste from bathrooms, even overflow from wells, all of it is carried away, keeping the city clean, healthy, free from the stench and disease that plagued other ancient urban centers. Roman aqueducts would later do something similar, but they came 2,000 years later. Here, in the Indus Valley, they'd mastered sanitation millennia before. Standardization is the glue that holds it all together. Bricks, still 4:2:1 in ratio, fit together like puzzle pieces, whether you're building a house in Harappa or a granary in Mohenjo-daro. Weights, made of stone or bronze, follow a binary system. 1, 2, 4, 8, 16, 32, 64 units, each unit about 13.7 grams. A merchant in Rakhigarhi can weigh out grain, and a trader in Lawful, 1,000 kilometers away, will understand exactly how much that is. This isn't just convenience, it's trust. It says, we speak the same language of measure, so we can do business without fear. Craftsmen take this uniformity seriously. At Shanhu-Daro, a satellite city of Mohenjo-daro, bead makers use drills calibrated to create holes less than a millimeter wide, turning carnelian into spheres that are all the same size. Potteries churn out balls and jars with the same red and black patterns, their rims curved to a precise angle. Even mistakes are handled with care. A pot that's lopsided is marked with a cross and discarded. A tool that doesn't meet standards is melted down and recast. This is quality control, 4,000 years before factories. Walk through the markets of any of these cities, and you'll hear a dozen languages, traders from Afghanistan haggling with local farmers, sailors from the Persian Gulf bartering spices for cloth. Stalls overflow with goods, wheat and barley from the fields, fish from the river, cotton cloth dyed with indigo and madder, beads that catch the light like tiny suns. A farmer might trade a sack of grain for a bronze axe. A weaver might swap cloth for a necklace of shell beads. This is an economy built on exchange, not conquest. No tax collectors, no royal treasuries hoarding gold. Just people trading what they have for what they need. Social life here is striking in its equality. Unlike in Egypt, where pharaohs built pyramids to house their mummies, or Mesopotamia, where kings erected ziggurats to glorify themselves, there are no royal tombs in the Indus Valley. The richest graves hold a few extra beads, a better pot, maybe a copper mirror, but nothing like the hoards of gold and jewels found in other ancient civilizations. Houses vary in size, but the largest are only 3 or 4 times bigger than the smallest. No one lives in a palace, no one starves in a ditch. This is a society that believes prosperity should be shared. Ordinary life unfolds in these cities with a rhythm that feels familiar. Families rise at dawn, the sound of water flowing through drains, mixing with the clatter of pots and the lowing of cattle. Women grind grain in stone mortar, their hands moving in time with generations of women before them. Men head to workshops or fields. Children chase each other through the streets, pausing to watch a potter at his wheel or a trader unpacking goods from a distant land. By evening, the markets quiet down and families gather in courtyards. sharing meals of flatbread, yogurt, and maybe a little fish simple food. But enough. Religion here is woven into daily life, not set apart in grand temples, small shrines. Neighborhoods with fire altars or statues of mother goddesses figures with full hips and gentle faces, symbols of fertility and life. Seals carved with images of a seated man surrounded by animals, the Pashupati seal, suggest stories of a god who watches over all living things, but there's no priesthood, no rituals that only the elite can perform. Faith is personal, communal, a way to connect with the earth and each other. By 2,200 years before Christ, these cities are at their peak. Harappa, Mohenjo-daro, Rakhigarhi, and over 1,500 smaller settlements form a network where goods, ideas, and people flow freely. A bead made in Gujarat might end up in a market in Afghanistan. A farmer from Harappa might marry a weaver from Mohenjo-daro, their children growing up speaking the same language, sharing the same stories. This is a civilization not of kings and armies, but of builders, traders, and dreamers, people who proved that you could have big cities without big egos, prosperity without plunder. What made it work? Maybe the rivers, which forced cooperation. You can't control a flood alone. Maybe the standardized bricks and weights, which made people trust one another. Maybe the absence of kings, which meant no one could hoard power or wealth. Whatever the reason, it worked. For 400 years, these cities thrived, a beacon of what humanity can achieve when it chooses to work together. As the sun sets over Mohenjo-daro, casting golden light on the great bath, you can almost hear it. Murmur of voices, the clink of tools, the laughter of children chasing each other through the streets. This is the sound of a civilization at peace with itself, a golden age that would be remembered only in dust and stone, but for a moment, shining, bright. Beneath the shade of date palms, where the Indus breeze carries the scent of damp earth and fired clay, the economy of the Indus Valley hums like a well-tuned loom. By 2,600 years before Christ, this isn't just a civilization of cities. It's a civilization of makers and traders, people who turn the land's gifts into goods that travel farther than any river current. From the wheat fields that stretch to the horizon to the workshops where hands shape stone and metal into art, every part of life is woven into a network of exchange that reaches across deserts, mountains, and seas. Let's start with the soil. For all wealth here begins with what grows from it. Farmers rise with the sun, their feet sinking into the rich alluvial mud of the river plains. They plant wheat and barley in neat rows, their plows pulled by humped zebu cattle that snort, shake their heads at the flies. Later, as the climate shifts slightly, they experiment with rice, a crop that loves the wetter fields near the riverbanks. By harvest time, the fields glow gold, and threshing floors echo with the sound of flails beating grain from stalks. This isn't just food, it's currency. A farmer with a surplus of wheat can trade it for a bronze axe, a length of cotton cloth, or a necklace of carnelian beads. But what happens to that wheat once it leaves the farm? It feeds the potters who work in the shadow of city walls, the smiths who hammer metal in workshops, the traders who load their donkeys and set off for distant towns. Granaries in every city, great brick structures with raised floors to keep. Rodents away store enough grain to tide the community through drought or flood. At Mohenjo-daro, the granaries are so large they could feed 35,000 people for months. This is security, written in wheat and barley. Now walk into the workshops, where the real magic happens. At Mohenjo-daro, a satellite of Mohenjo-daro, the air shimmers with dust from grinding stone and the sharp smell of carnelian. This is the bead capital of the Indus Valley, a place where hundreds of craftsmen spend their days turning rough stones into tiny works of art. Imagine a room full of tables, each with a craftsman bent over his work. One holds a piece of carnelian, heating it over a small fire until it glows red, a trick to deepen its color. Another uses a drill tipped with diamond dust to bore a hole less than a millimeter wide through the center. The drills spin so fast they blur, powered by a bow that the craftsman works with his foot, leaving his hands free to steady the stone. The result? Beads so uniform they could have been made by a machine, spherical, perfectly sized, strung into. Necklaces that catch the light like clusters of ripe fruit. These aren't just pretty, they're valuable. A single strand of carnelian beads might buy a farmer's cow or a merchant's boat ride to the coast. They're traded up and down. The Indus sent east to what is now Rajasthan, west to Afghanistan, even across the sea to Oman. In Mesopotamia, where carnelian is rare, these beads become treasures fit for kings found in the graves of Sumerian rulers, who wrapped them around their necks as if wearing pieces of the sun. Chandhu Daro isn't the only workshop town. At Shortagai, nestled in the mountains of northern Afghanistan, the air smells of stone dust and wood smoke. This isn't a farming community, it's a mining outpost, built to control the flow of lapis lazuli, that deep blue stone as precious as gold. Miners climb the mountainside, chipping away at rock to free the blue veins, then carry their haul down to the town. Here, craftsmen cut and polish the lapis, shaping it into beads, amulets, and inlays for wooden boxes. Caravans arrive from the Indus Valley, loaded with wheat, cloth, and bronze tools, to trade for the lapis, then trek back, their animals weighed down with the blue treasure. Shortagai is a bridge between the mountains and the plains, a place where the wealth of the earth becomes the wealth of the city. But trade isn't just over land. Along the coast, where the Indus meets the Arabian Sea, a different kind of workshop thrives. At Balakot, fishermen haul in their catch at dawn, but by midday, the beach is alive with another kind of activity. Women and men breaking shells into pieces, drilling holes in them, and polishing them into shiny white beads. These shell ornaments are light, easy to carry, and beloved across the Indus Valley. A farmer in Harappa might never see the sea, but he might wear a shell necklace, a tiny piece of the coast around his neck. All these goods beads, tools, cloth, grain need to move, and that's where the traders come in. Picture a merchant named Arshun, his turban wrapped tight against the sun, leading a caravan of 5 donkeys down a dusty road. Each donkey carries a load, a basket of wheat, a roll of cotton cloth, a box of carnelian beads. He's heading from Mohenjo-daro to Lothal, a journey of weeks, but he knows the way. He stops at villages along the route, trading a few beads for a meal, a length of cloth for a night's shelter. When he reaches Lothal, he'll exchange his goods for shells from the coast, then turn around and head back his donkeys, now carrying the sea's treasures. Lothal is more than a trading stop, though. It's a port, and not just any port. Its engineers have built a tidal dock, a basin carved into the earth, connected to the river by a channel that can be opened or closed with gates. When the tide rises, the gates open and ships sail in, their hulls floating high. When the tide falls, the gates close, trapping water in the basin so the ships don't run aground. This is genius, a harbor that works with the moon's pull, not against it. Stand on the dock at Lothal, and you might see ships from Bahrain or Oman tying up, their crews unloading copper ingots in barrels of dates, then loading up on cotton, cloth, and carnelian beads. These aren't small boats. Some are 30 tons, big enough to carry a year's worth of trade goods. Sailors tell stories of storms at sea, of navigating by the stars, of markets in distant lands where Indus goods are as valuable as gold. In Mesopotamia, one sailor says, wiping salt from his brow, they call us Meluha, the land of the black stone, the land of plenty. And it's true. Sumerian texts from cities like Ur and Uruk talk about Meluha, a distant land that sends carnelian, ivory, and wood in exchange for wool and barley. Archaeologists have found Indus seals in Mesopotamia, their symbols still clear after 4,000 years, proof that traders from the Indus Valley walked the streets of these foreign cities, haggling over prices, sharing stories, maybe even teaching a Sumerian craftsman a trick or two about bead making. Back in the Indus cities, the fruits of this trade are everywhere. A merchant's house in Harappa might have a copper ball from Oman, a shell necklace from Balakat, a lapis lazuli amulet from Shortagai, all gathered in one place, a little museum of the wider world. A potter decorates a storage jar with images of ships, their sails billowing, a reminder of where the clay for the pot might end up. What makes this trade work? Trust, for one thing. A merchant in Mohenjo-daro needs to know that the beads he sends to Mesopotamia will be paid for, that the copper he orders from Oman will arrive. But it's also about standards. Those carnelian beads from Mohenjo-daro are the same size and quality, whether they're sold in Harappa or Yu, so buyers know what they're getting. The weights and measures are the same across the Indus Valley, so a merchant can weigh out grain or metal and be sure the amount is fair. This isn't just trade, it's a system, one that relies on everyone playing by the same rules. Of course, not everyone is a trader or a craftsman. Most people are farmers, tending their fields, raising their families, trading a little surplus for what they need. But even they feel the pulse of the wider world. A farmer might never see Lothal's dock, but he knows that the bronze plow he uses to till his fields might have started as copper in Oman, melted down and shaped by a smith in Mohenjo-daro. His daughter's carnelian necklace might have been made in Mohenjo-daro, traded to a merchant, and eventually sold at the local market. This is the beauty of the Indus economy. It connects people, even if they never meet. A bead maker in Mohenjo-daro, a miner in Shortagai, a sailor in Lothal, a farmer in Harappa, they're all part of the same web, each dependent on the others. It's not about kings or conquests. It's about work, skill, and the simple truth that we all need something from someone else. As the sun sets over Lothal's dock, painting the water gold, a ship sets sail for Oman, its hold full of Indus goods. On board, a sailor hums a song he learned from a merchant in Mohenjo-daro, a song about the river and the sea, about the hands that make things and the ships that carry them. It's a song of plenty, a song of connection, a song that belongs to everyone, whether they live in a city of brick or a village of mud huts, whether they make beads or grow wheat, whether they've seen the sea or only heard stories of it. In this world of hands and markets, the Indus Valley isn't just a place. It's a conversation, one that spans deserts and seas, one that says, we're here and we have something to share. The first light of dawn seeps over the mud brick walls of a house in Mohenjo-daro, where a rooster crows once, twice, then falls silent. Inside, a family stirs. A mother rises, her bare feet padding across the cool earthen floor of the courtyard, where a clay oven glows faintly from last night's embers. Her children, 2 boys and a girl, tumble out of a small room off the courtyard, their hair messy, their laughter loud as they chase each other around a well. This is not a palace or a temple. It is an ordinary home, And in its ordinariness lies the true magic of the Indus Valley Civilization. A life built not for kings, but for people. Let's step inside, shall we? The house wraps around a central courtyard, open to the sky, where the family cooks, works, and gathers when the day is done. Off the courtyard are 4 rooms. A sleeping chamber for the parents, a smaller room for the children, a storage space piled high with large ceramic jars, some holding wheat, others barley, a few sealed tight with clay to keep insects out, and most surprising of all, a bathroom. Yes, a bathroom. Not a luxurious one, but a practical space with a sloped floor that carries waste through a small clay pipe, hidden beneath the courtyard, to a larger drain under the street. A stone basin sits in the corner, filled with water from the well in the courtyard. Each morning, the family washes here, splashing cool water on their faces before the day grows hot. Can you imagine? 4,500 years ago, in a world where most people bathed in rivers, if at all, even ordinary families here had a private place to clean themselves. It is a small thing, but it speaks volumes about dignity, about planning, about caring for one another. The well itself is a marvel. It's circular, lined with bricks stacked so neatly they look like they were laid yesterday, and it plunges 15 meters deep into the earth, tapping into an aquifer that stays pure year-round. A rope with a clay bucket hangs over the edge, its wood handle smooth from years of use. The father pulls it up now, the bucket clinking as it breaks the surface, and pours water into a large jar for cooking. "Careful," he says as his youngest son tries to help. "Don't lean too far." By mid-morning, the courtyard is alive with activity. The mother grinds wheat in a stone mortar, her arm moving in a steady rhythm that turns grains into flour. Nearby, the oldest boy sits cross-legged, stringing shell beads onto a thread practice for when he learns to make the carnelian ones that traders love. The girl plays with a clay cart, its wheels turning smoothly as she pushes it back and forth, mimicking the traders who pass through the city with their donkeys. Toys are scattered around. A small figurine of a zebu with a movable head, a whistle shaped like a bird that trills when you blow into it, a set of stone dice that the family plays with after dinner. These aren't just distractions. They're lessons. The cart teaches about movement and trade, the dice about strategy, the whistle about music and joy. Childhood here isn't just about growing up. It's about learning to be part of the community, one game at a time. Lunch is simple but satisfying. The mother bakes flatbread on the clay oven, its surface bubbling and golden. She serves it with yogurt made from zebu milk, a handful of dates, and a bowl of peas cooked with a little salt. Sometimes, if the fishermen have been lucky, there's fish smoked or grilled, its flaky flesh tasting of the river. This is no feast, but it is nourishing. Grains for energy, dairy for strength, fruit for sweetness. The family eats together, sitting on mats in the courtyard, talking about the day, how the wheat is growing, whether the traders will bring new beads, if the monsoon rains will come on time. Afternoon heat drives them indoors, where the rooms stay cool. The father sharpens a bronze sickle, his fingers tracing the edge to check for sharpness. Tomorrow, he'll help harvest wheat in the fields outside the city. The mother spins cotton thread on a simple loom, her hands moving so fast. They blur, turning fluffy fibers into thin, even strands that will later be woven into cloth. The children lie on mats, listening to stories. Tales of a great river that once flowed where the desert is now, of a man who sits cross-legged and talks to animals, of spirits that live in trees and protect the village. Religion here is as ordinary as the bread they eat. There are no grand temples, No priests in fancy robes, no rituals that require gold or sacrifice. Instead, faith lives in small daily acts. The family lights a candle each evening at a tiny shrine in the corner of the Ove. Courtyard a niche holding a clay figurine of a woman with wide hips and a gentle smile, her arms outstretched as if offering blessing. This is the mother goddess, a symbol of fertility and life, and lighting her candle is a way of saying, "Thank you for the wheat, for the children, for another day." Near the shrine stands a small fire altar, a square of bricks, its surface blackened by smoke. On special days' harvest, the first rain, a child's birthday, the father lights a fire here, throwing in a handful of fragrant herbs that send a sweet smoke curling toward the sky. "For the ancestors," he says, and the children repeat it, though they're not sure who the ancestors are, just that they're watching. Walk through any neighborhood in these cities, and you'll see similar shrines, similar altars. Some have carvings of trees with birds in their branches, the sacred pibal, a tree that grows tall and strong, its roots deep, its shade cool. Others have images of zebu cattle, their humps proud, their eyes calm symbols of abundance. For a healthy zebu means good milk, strong plowing, life itself. Then there are the seals. Small squares of stone, carved with images and symbols, used to stamp clay onto bundles of grain or boxes of beads. Every merchant has one, every important. Household, too. Press it into soft clay, and it leaves a mark, a signature, a promise that what's inside is good and true. Some seals show animals, tigers, elephants, fish swimming in lines. Others show a man sitting cross-legged, surrounded by creatures, his eyes closed as if in meditation. Archaeologists call him the Pashupati, the Lord of Animals. But to the people who carved him, he was probably a story, a reminder that humans are part of nature, not above it. But the most mysterious thing about these seals is the writing. Small symbols, over 400 different ones, curl around the images. Lines, dots, squiggles that look like fish or stars or wheat stalks. No one has ever deciphered them. Maybe they're names. This belongs to Arjun. Maybe they're stories. These beads came from Shanhu Daro. Maybe they're prayers. Protect this grain. Whatever they mean, they were important. Merchants used them to mark their goods, families to seal storage jars, priests to record rituals. They are the voice of a civilization that spoke, but whose words we have not yet learned to hear. What do you think they're saying? Maybe a mother wrote, "This bread is for my children." Maybe a trader, "These beads are the best in the jaw." Valley. Maybe a farmer marked, "This wheat will feed the city." We may never know, but that's part of the magic, imagining the voices behind the symbols. As evening falls, the family gathers again. The father returns from the fields, his boots caked with mud, and washes at the well. A mother finishes weaving a length of cloth, its pattern simple but striking, stripes of indigo and white, like the river and the sky. The children put away their toys, their yawns loud and frequent. Together, they eat dinner by the light of Vide, the shrine candle, leftover bread, a bowl of lentils, a little honey to sweeten the end of the day. Outside, the city quiets. The sound of drains gurgling carries through the streets, mixing with the lowing of cattle being led home, the clatter of a late-night potter finishing his work. A guard walks the walls, his footsteps slow, humming a tune to keep himself awake. In windows, candles flicker one by one as families settle in for the night. This is daily life in the Indus Valley, not grand battles or royal weddings, but the rhythm of people who know how to live together. They build wells so everyone has. Water drains so the streets stay clean, shrines so they can give thanks. They make toys for their children, beads to trade, seals to say, I promise. They speak in symbols we can't read, but their lives tell a story we understand, of work and play, of faith and family, of finding joy in the ordinary dot. As the last candle is snuffed out in the courtyard, the house falls silent. Only the well, deep and steady, whispers of the water that binds them all, the river, the aquifer, the family, the city, the civilization. Tomorrow will be much like today, and that is a gift. The wind off the Sarasvati feels different now. It carries less moisture, less of the rich, earthy scent of monsoon rains, and more of the dry, sharp tongue of dust. By 2,200 years before Christ, the first cracks in the Indus Valley Civilization's foundation are starting to show, not sudden, jagged breaks, but faint, almost imperceptible lines, the kind you might miss if you weren't looking closely. This is not collapse. Not yet. It is change, slow and sneaky, slipping into daily life like sand through fingers. Have you ever watched a stream shrink in summer? At first, you barely notice. The water level drops an inch, then another, but the current still flows. The fish still swim. Then one day, you realize the rocks that were once underwater are now dry, and the current is little more than a trickle. That's what's happening to the SAR-SVA TI. It starts with the rivers. Deep beneath the Himalayas, tectonic. Plates shift slowly, millimeter by millimeter like giants turning in their sleep. These shifts nudge the Yamuna River, once a loyal tributary of the Sarasvati, onto a new path. Bit by bit, it drifts east toward the Ganges, taking its water with it. Then another tributary follows, and another. By 2,100 years before Christ, the Sarasvati's flow has dropped by 30%. Where it once rushed wide and strong, it now meanders, its banks shrinking, its waters shallower each year. Farmers are the first to notice. They wake at dawn, lower their buckets into the well, and find the water a little farther down than yesterday. Must be the heat, they mutter, digging the well deeper, their shovels clinking against stone. But the water keeps dropping. By midday, the sun blazes hotter than they remember, and the monsoon rains, when they come, are lighter, shorter. Fields that once sprouted thick with wheat now yield sparse, stunted stalks. A farmer in Harappa kneels to touch the soil. It's dry, crumbly, nothing like the rich mud of his father's time. Where did the water go? He asks his zebu, who snorts and flicks its tail, as if it knows but can't say. The change isn't just in the rivers. The wind shifts too. Monsoons that once arrived like clockwork drenching the plains in July, softening the soil for planting now. Come late or not at all. Tree rings from this period tell the story. Narrower, tighter, evidence of years with 20% less rain than before. Lake beds shrink, exposing white, cracked clay where fish once swam. Villages that depended on small streams watch them dry up, their beds turning into paths for traders' donkeys. At first, people adapt. They dig deeper wells, their walls shored up with extra bricks. They plant drought-resistant wheat, the kind that can survive on less water. They build more reservoirs, like the ones at Dolavira, to catch every drop of rain when it does fall. We've weathered dry years before, elders say, sitting in the shade of pipal trees. This will pass. But it doesn't pass. And as the water grows scarcer, other things start to fray. Trade, once as steady as the river's current, slows. A merchant from Mohenjo-Daro sets out for Oman with a load of carnelian beads. But the journey takes longer oases along the way, have dried up, and he must detour, losing time, losing beads to bandits who are hungrier than usual. When he finally reaches the coast, the Omani traders have less to offer. The sea isn't as generous either, they say. Fish are scarce, and our boats can't go as far. He returns with fewer copper ingots than he'd hoped, and the bead makers in Shanhu notice orders are down, and they start making. Fewer beads, their drills spinning less often. Standardization, that pride of the Indus Valley, begins to slip. For centuries, a brick from Harappa was a brick from Mohenjo-daro. A bead from Shanhu was a bead from Lothal. But now, potters in distant villages start experimenting. Maybe they can't get the same red clay anymore, so they use a browner one. Maybe they don't have access to the same pigments, so they paint simpler patterns, fewer zigzags, more dots. A pot from Harappa still looks like a Harappa pot, but a pot from a small village 100 miles away? It's starting to look different. Not bad, just not the same. Smiths feel it too. Bronze tools, once identical across the valley, now have slight variations. A sickle from one town might be a little shorter, a knife from another a little thicker. No one plans it this way. It's just harder to get the same tin ore, harder to trade for the right mix of metals. So they make do, and making do means letting go of the strict rules that once bound them. Even the seals, those tiny symbols of order, change. The carvings grow simpler. The Pashupati figure with his animals appears less often, replaced by single rough-hewn animals or plain geometric shapes. Maybe the craftsmen are in a hurry. Maybe they've forgotten the old patterns. Maybe they just don't care as much. Whatever the reason, the seals no longer speak with one voice. They murmur in different accents. Social life softens at the edges too. The granaries, once overflowing, are only half full. Communities that used to share water, freely letting a neighbor's field borrow from their canal, start arguing. We need it more, a farmer says, blocking a channel with stones. Our children are hungry. The elders try to mediate, but their voices carry less weight than before. When there's enough for everyone, it's easy to be generous. When there's not, harder. Children notice, even if they don't understand. They hear their parents whispering. At night, talking about wells and rain, and whether the traders will come. Their toys grow simpler, fewer clay carts, more stones and sticks. A little girl in Mohenjo-daro asks her mother, "Why don't we have new beads anymore?" Her mother smooths the girl's hair and says, "Beads aren't as important as bread, love." And through it all, the Sarasvati shrinks. Fishermen who once cast their nets in the middle of the river now stand on dry land, staring at a trickle that was once a giant. It's like watching a friend die, an old fisherman says, his voice cracking. He remembers swimming in the Sarasvati as a boy, its waters reaching his shoulders. Now, his grandchildren can wade across it without getting their hair wet. By 2,000 years before Christ, the whispers of change have grown louder, though they're still not shouts. The cities are still there, Harappa, Mohenjo-daro, Rakhigarhi, but they feel emptier. Some neighborhoods are abandoned, their houses left with doors hanging open, as if their inhabitants just stepped out for a moment and never came back. Workshops close, their tools gathering dust. The great bath at Mohenjo-daro still holds water, but fewer people gather there. This is the strange thing about decline. It doesn't feel like decline while it's happening. It feels like adaptation, like making do, like waiting for things to get better. People still laugh, still celebrate. Births still trade what they can. They just do it a little more quietly, a little more cautiously. But in the quiet, in the empty neighborhoods and the shrinking river, a question hangs. How long can you adapt before there's nothing left to adapt to? The wind carries that question, now dry and sharp across the plains. And somewhere, far off, a river sighs and grows a little smaller. The Sarasvati's farewell was not a sudden goodbye, but a long, slow fading, like an old song growing quieter, note by note, until only the echo remains. By 1900 years before Christ, the great river that had nourished the Indus Valley for millennia was dying. Its once mighty current, which had carried ships and watered fields, shrank to a trickle, then a chain of stagnant pools, then nothing. Satellite images today show its ghost, a dry channel snaking through the plains, filled with wind-blown sand, where fish once swam and traders once sailed. Can you picture it? A river so large it dwarfed the Ganges, reduced to a memory. Farmers, who'd tilled its banks for generations, now stood on its cracked bed, their feet crunching on parched earth, staring at where the water used to be. It was here, an elder says, pointing to a faint indentation in the ground, deep enough to drown a buffalo. My grandfather fished here. Now look. The cause, as before, was the earth itself. Tectonic shifts in the Himalayas' slow, relentless had siphoned more and more water from the Sarasvati's tributaries, diverting them east to the Ganges. What little rain fell during the weakening monsoons wasn't enough to replenish it. The river's lifeline, once so strong, was cut. River went the farms. The fertile alluvial soil, which had thrived on annual floods, turned hard and salty. Irrigation canals that once carried water to distant fields now sat empty, their clay bricks cracking in the sun. Wheat and barley, which needed steady moisture, withered. Even drought-resistant crops failed. A farmer in Kalibangan, once a thriving town on the Sarasvati, pulls up a dead stalk, its roots shriveled, and weeps. There's no water, he tells his son. No water at all. Hunger followed. Granaries, which had once held enough to survive lean years, emptied. Families ate less one meal a day instead of two, plain flatbread without yogurt, no fish. From the river, children grew thin, their bellies swollen with hunger. Villages that had stood for centuries were abandoned overnight, their mud brick houses left with doors flapping, as if their inhabitants thought they might return. But they didn't. The exodus began slowly, then in waves. People packed what they could carry, a few clay pots, a blanket, a necklace of beads, too precious to leave, and walked. Some headed east, toward the Ganges Valley, where rivers still flowed and rain still fell. Others went south to Gujarat, where the coast offered. Fish and the monsoons were a little stronger. A few trekked north to the Himalayan foothills, where streams still ran clear. Imagine a family on the move, a father carrying a child on his shoulders, a mother balancing a bundle of grain on her head, a dog trotting beside them, sniffing for water. They follow old trade routes, now overgrown, asking directions from other travelers. Is the Ganges still full? They ask. Will Gujarat have room for us? No one knows, but staying means starving. Cities felt the loss first. Mohenjo-daro, once home to 35,000 people, depended on the Indus, but even that river's flow was reduced by the changing climate. Its wells, which had tapped into aquifers fed by the Sarasvati, ran dry. The famous drainage system, which had carried waste away for centuries, clogged without enough water to flush it, sewage backed up, turning streets into stinking messes. People moved out of the worst-hit neighborhoods, their houses collapsing into rubble as rain and wind took their toll. Harappa, too, emptied. Its granaries stood open, their floors covered in dust. Workshops where bead makers and smiths once labored were silent. The wide streets, once busy with carts and traders, now echoed only with the wind. A few stragglers stayed, clinging to the ruins, but they were ghosts in a ghost town. Rakagari, the largest of them all, suffered the same fate. Its 350 hectares, once teeming with 100,000 people, became a vast empty expanse. Satellite images show the grid of streets still visible, beneath the soil, but no one walked them anymore. The great drains, which had been engineering marvels, filled with sand and debris, their clay pipes cracking. What happened to the people who left? They didn't vanish. They merged with communities in their new homes, bringing their skills farming, pottery, bead making with them. A farmer from Harappa might teach a Ganges Valley family how to build a well with brick linings. A potter from Mohenjo-daro might show Gujarati craftsmen how to use the fast wheel, leaving behind pottery styles that hint at her origins. But something was lost in the moving. The shared culture that had bound the Indus Valley standardized. Bricks, uniform weights, common symbols frayed. In Gujarat, potters developed new patterns, different from those in the Ganges Valley. In the Himalayas, farmers adapted their tools to mountain soil, abandoning the old bronze sickles. The Indus Way didn't disappear, but it split into many ways. Like a river branching into streams, the Sarasvati's dry bed became a border, not a highway. Towns that had once traded with each other, shared ideas, married into each other's. Families now grew apart. A merchant from the Ganges might never meet a craftsman from Gujarat. The seals with their mysterious symbols, once used to mark trade goods across the valley, became rare. Then, by 1700 years before Christ, the Sarasvati was gone. No water, no ships, no life. Only stories told by elders to children, who passed them on. Once there was a great river here. It made us strong. It made us one. The Indus River still flowed, but it was a shadow of its former self. Its cities, too, were shadows. Mohenjo-daro's great bath, once filled with clear water, now held rainwater and mosquitoes. Harappa's granaries were homes for rodents. The dream of a unified, planned, peaceful civilization, born by rivers, nurtured by trade, built on shared trust, was fading. This is the lesson of the drying channels. Civilizations are not just built by people. They are built by the land, by rivers that flow, rains that fall, soil that grows. Take those away, and even the most sophisticated society can unravel. The Indus people were clever, cooperative, resilient, but they couldn't make water from. Thus, as the last family leaves Mohenjo-daro, the mother pauses at the city gate, looking back. She remembers drawing water from the well, baking bread in the courtyard, the sound of her children laughing in the streets. Goodbye, she whispers, to the city, to the river, to the life they had. Then she turns and walks east toward the Ganges, toward whatever comes next. The wind blows across the empty city, carrying the sound of a door creaking on its hinges. And somewhere, in the dry bed of the Sarasvati, a single bead carved from carnelian, perfect and small, lies, buried in the sand, waiting for the day someone will find it and wonder, who made this? What happened here? The light that once illuminated the Indus Valley, steady, bright, shared by all, now flickers like a candle in a draught. By 1700 years before Christ, the great cities are hollow shells, their streets silent, their drains clogged, their granaries empty. What remains is not a civilization, but fragments, small villages clinging to the edges of deserts, families scratching out a living in the shadow of what was, cultures diverging like ripples from a stone dropped in water. This is not collapse, with a bang but a whimper slow. painful unraveling of the ties that once bound millions together, let us walk through the ruins of Mohenjo-daro one last time. The great bath still holds water, but it is green and stagnant, home to frogs and mosquitoes. The streets, once swept clean by careful residents, are choked with weeds and rubble. A child's clay cart lies on its side, its wheels broken, half buried in dust. Nearby, a house stands with its door hanging off its hinges. Inside, a few pots remain, their surfaces cracked, their paint faded. It is not destruction, but abandonment, the kind that happens when people stop caring, stop repairing, stop believing that tomorrow will be better. The first thread to snap is cooperation. For centuries, the Indus people had lived by a silent agreement. Share the water, trade fairly, build together. But with water scarce and food even scarcer, that agreement frayed. Villages that once shared wells now fought over them, posting guards to keep strangers away. Farmers who once helped each other harvest now hid their grain, afraid to share. "Why should I give you mine?" a farmer snaps at his neighbor, who begs for a handful of wheat. "You'd do the same to me." This bitterness seeped into every part of life. The craftsmen who once took pride in standardized beads and tools now made do with whatever materials they could find. A bead from this period is lopsided, its whole off-center evidence of a hurried hand or a heart no longer in the work. Bronze tools, once sharp and uniform, are now crudely shaped, their edges dull. No one bothers to melt down the bad ones anymore. There is no time, no energy, no reason to care. The seals, those tiny symbols of order, all but disappear. A few linger, but their carvings are sloppy, their symbols simplified, like a language forgotten, remembered only in broken phrases. Maybe the traders who once carried them are gone, or maybe there is nothing left to trade. Either way, the shared vocabulary of the Indus Valley fades, leaving people to speak in local dialects, unintelligible to those 100 miles away. Cities shrink into villages, villages into hamlets. Harappa, once a metropolis of 25,000, is reduced to a cluster of huts huddled near the old granaries. The residents farm small plots, hunt whatever game remains, and rarely venture beyond the ruins of their city. They tell stories of the time when the river ran full, but the stories grow fuzzy like dreams. A young boy finds a carnelian bead in the dirt and asks his grandfather what it is. "A toy," the old man says, not remembering it's true. Purpose, trade routes, once as busy as a beehive, wither away. The road from Mohenjo-daro to Lothal, once trod by merchant caravans, is now overgrown with thorny bush. The tidal dock at Lothal, once a marvel of engineering, silts up, its gates rusted shut. A sailor's son finds a fragment of a clay pot from Oman and wonders where it came from. His father shakes his head. "Far away," he says. "We don't go there anymore." As the old order fades, new ways emerge, small, local, unconnected. In Gujarat, potters paint their vessels with fish and waves, reflecting their new life by the sea. In the Ganges Valley, farmers build wooden houses on stilts to protect against floods that are now more common than droughts. In the Himalayan foothills, herders weave wool into thick blankets, suited for cold mountain nights. These are not bad ways of life. They are adaptations, survival strategies, but they are not Indus ways. They are something else, something. Smaller dot the social fabric, once tight-knit and resilient, frays into threads. There are no more public projects, no new wells, no repaired drains, no shared granaries. What gets built, it's built by families for themselves. A father digs a well in his courtyard, deep enough for his family, but no one else. A mother weaves cloth for her children, not for trade. Community, that great strength of the Indus Valley, gives way to self-reliance. It is not wrong, just different and lonely. Even religion, once a unifying force, fragments. The mother goddess figurines, once similar across the valley, now take new forms. In one village, she has a bird's head. In another, she carries a spear instead of a basket. Fire altars, once built to precise measurements, are now haphazard piles of stones. The Pashupati seal, with its man and animals, is forgotten, replaced by images of local spirits, snakes, trees, mountain peaks. By 1500 years before Christ, the Indus Valley Civilization, as a single, coherent entity, is gone. What remains is a patchwork of small, isolated communities, each doing its best to survive. They carry fragments of the old knowledge, the way to make bronze, the trick to spinning cotton, the memory of a great river. But these fragments are not enough to rebuild what was lost. The irony is that the people themselves are not gone. They are still here, their descendants farming the same lands, albeit in smaller numbers. They have not been conquered or destroyed. They have scattered, adapted, changed. Like a tree cut down, they have sprouted new shoots, but the trunk is gone. What caused this unraveling? It is easy to blame the river, the drought, the changing climate, and they played their part. But the real loss was trust. Trust that the river would flow, trust that neighbors would share, trust that the future would be like the past. When that trust died, the civilization died with it, standing in the ruins of Rakagari, the largest of the Indus cities. You can still see the grid of streets beneath the sand, the outlines of houses, the ghost of a drain. It is a map of a world that worked once, a world where people built for everyone, not just themselves, a world where light was shared. Now, the sun sets over the empty plains, and the only light is from small fires in distant villages, each one burning alone. The sun sets on the Indus Valley for the last time, not with a blaze, but with a soft, fading glow that turns the dust pink. By 1700 years before Christ, the great cities are not just empty, they are being forgotten. The wind blows sand over the streets, covering the drains, filling the wells, erasing the marks of human hands. What was once a civilization becomes a landscape, and a memory, then nothing at all. This is the long goodbye. 4 centuries of slow, steady vanishing, until even the stories are gone. Imagine the last family leaving Harappa. They are not fleeing war or disaster, just moving, because there is no reason to stay. The mother carries a clay pot, its rim chipped, that once held grain for a community. The father lugs a bronze axe, dulled from years of use, that was once part of a standardized set. The children clutch small toys, a broken zebu figurine, a stone bead found in the dirt. They walk east toward the Ganges, and when they look back, the city is already shrinking, its walls blending into the plain. Do they grieve? Or do they simply feel relief to be leaving a place that no longer nourishes them? As the cities empty, the land reclaims them. Trees grow through the cracks in the great bath at Mohenjo-daro, their roots tangling with the bricks. Wild animals make their dens in the granaries of Harappa, where mice once feasted on stored wheat. The grid of streets, so carefully planned, is overgrown with grass and scrub, until only the sharpest eye can trace their outlines. A traveler passing through might notice mounds in the distance, but she would not guess they were once homes to tens of thousands. Just hills, she would say, and ride on. The people who left did not vanish. They settled in new lands, married into local tribes, and slowly their identity melted away. In the Punjab, A culture called Cemetery H emerged, named for the Chi, way its people buried their dead. Their pottery mixed old Indus patterns with new designs, the familiar zigzags now alongside bold, straight lines. They still used bronze, but not with the precision of the old smiths. They herded zebu cattle, but no longer carved them into seals as sacred symbols. They were not Indus people anymore. They were something new, something made from fragments. In Gujarat, another group, the Jukar culture, took root. They fished more, farmed less, and their tools grew simpler. A Jukar potter might shape a bowl that faintly echoed the old Indus styles, but she did not know why, just that it felt right. A habit passed down from a grandmother who remembered a story about a great river, the knowledge that built the Indus. Indus Valley began to leak away like water from a cracked pot. No one remembered how to make bricks in the 4:2:1 ratio, or why it mattered. The skill of drilling tiny holes in carnelian beads was lost. A bead from this period is large, lumpy, its hole jagged. The drains, once a marvel of engineering, were. Forgotten people dug simple pits for waste, not understanding the system of clay pipes that lay beneath their feet. Even the gods changed. The mother goddess figurines grew rare, replaced by new deities with strange names. The sacred pipal tree was still venerated, but the stories of why were muddled. "It's just a tree," parents told their children, "but don't cut it down." The old ones said not to. By 1500 years before Christ, the Indus script, those 400 mysterious symbols, disappeared entirely. No more seals, no more marked pottery, no more attempts to write down the world. It was as if the civilization had decided to stop speaking, to slip into silence. Worst of all, it was forgotten, not just by the people who came after, but by history itself. The Vedas, ancient texts of India, sing of gods and battles and kings, but not a word about Harappa or Mohenjo-daro. The epics Ramayana and Mahabharata, which remember so much of India's past, are silent about the great cities that once stood on the plains. It is as if the Indus Valley never existed, a civilization erased not by violence, but by neglect, by the slow grind of time. People lived on the ruins, unknowingly. A farmer plowed a field in Punjab, his plow hitting a brick from Harappa's walls. He dug it up, tossed it aside, and planted wheat. A shepherd in Sindh built a hut using bricks from Mohenjo-daro, not realizing they were 3,000 years old. Children played among the mounds, finding beads and broken pots, and called them magic stones, never guessing they were pieces of a lost world. What was left? Dust, mostly. And beneath the dust, bricks stacked in neat patterns, waiting to be uncovered. Clay pots with faded paintings, sealed tight with time. Seals carved with animals and symbols, their meaning lost. A child's toy cart, its wheels still turning slightly when the wind blows. These things did not shout. They whispered back. By 1300 years before Christ, the long goodbye was over. The Indus Valley Civilization had vanished, not with a cry, but with a sigh. It had no monuments to its kings, no inscriptions to its glory, no stories to keep it alive. It left only silence and those quiet, buried things, waiting for a day. Thousands of years later, when a railway engineer would pick up a brick and wonder, where did this come from? Waiting for an archaeologist to brush away the dust and gasp, there was a city here, waiting for the world to remember. But for now, in 1300 years before Christ, there is only the wind, blowing across the empty plains, carrying nothing but the sound of a civilization breathing its last. The year is 1856, and the plains of the Punjab are trembling under the clatter of progress. British engineers, racing to lay railway tracks across colonial India, need stone tons of it to stabilize the rails on the soft alluvial soil. Near a village called Harappa, laborers stumble upon something curious. Mounds of bricks, neatly baked, uniform in size, scattered across the countryside like pieces of a giant's puzzle. Perfect, says the foreman, wiping sweat from his brow. These bricks are hard, rectangular, and best of all already made. No need to fire new ones. Teams of workers load them onto carts, hauling them to the railway line. The bricks are laid beneath the tracks, their edges grinding against steel, their surfaces chipping under the weight of locomotives. No one asks where they came from. To the engineers, they're just building materials. To the laborers, they're ancient rubble, left by some forgotten king. But these are no ordinary bricks. They are 4,000 years old, forged in kilns when the Indus Valley Civilization was at its peak. Their dimensions 4 parts long, 2 parts wide, 1 part high, are the same as those used in Mohenjo-daro, 1,000 kilometers away. They are silent witnesses to a world that once thrived here, now crushed beneath the wheels of a new age. For decades, the bricks keep coming. Railway lines stretch from Karachi to Delhi, and with them, the ruins of Harappa vanish, 1 cartload at a time. Entire neighborhood streets, houses, trains are dismantled, their bricks repurposed to build bridges and stations. It's a tragic irony. The most sophisticated urban planning of antiquity is destroyed to make way for the infrastructure of modernity, and no one notices. Then, in 1872, a man named Alexander Cunningham rides into Harappa. A British Army officer. With a passion for antiquities, he's been hearing rumors of old mounds in the Punjab. What he finds stops him in his tracks. The bricks, for one thing, too uniform, too precise to be random. Scattered across the ground, he picks up pottery shards with strange patterns, and small stone seals carved with animals he doesn't recognize. This is no ordinary village, he writes in his notebook, but his superiors are unimpressed. They care about palaces and temples, not piles of bricks in a dusty plain. Focus on the Taj Mahal, they tell him. Leave the Punjab mud to the farmers. And so Harappa slips back into obscurity. Fast forward to 1902. A young archaeologist named John Marshall arrives in India, appointed Director General of the Archaeological Survey. Unlike his predecessors, Marshall is not interested only in glamorous sights. He's curious about the deep past, the layers beneath the temples and forts. What if there's something older? He wonders. In 1920, he sends 2 men to investigate the rumors, Dayaram Sani to Harappa and R.D. Banerjee to a site in Sindh called Mohenjo-daro, Mound of the Dead, as the locals call it. Both men expect to find little more than minor ruins. What they uncover will rewrite history. Sani's team at Harappa starts digging and quickly hits a wall, not a natural one, but a man-made fortress of baked brick. Beneath it, they find streets laid out in perfect grids, houses with wells, and bathrooms, and seals carved with the same mysterious symbols Cunningham had seen. This is a city, Sani writes to Marshall, his handwriting excited. A big one. But it is Banerjee's discovery at Mohenjo-daro. It sends shockwaves around the world. On a hot day in 1922, his workers uncover a rectangular pool, lined with bricks so tightly fitted they seem fused together. Bitumen seals the joints, making it waterproof. Steps lead down into the water, and a drain at one end allows it to be emptied and refilled. It is the Great Bath, and it looks as if it could have been built yesterday. Around it, the city unfolds. A grid of streets, houses with private bathrooms and drains, that connect to a citywide sewage system, granaries, and workshops. It's like nothing we've ever seen, Banerjee writes. Here, in a place no one had heard of, was evidence of an urban civilization that rivaled Egypt and Mesopotamia, but with one stunning difference. No palaces, no royal tombs, no monuments to kings. This was a city built for people, not rulers. Marshall announces the discoveries in 1924, and the world gasps. Newspapers publish photos of the Great Bath, of the grid streets, of the seals with their strange animals and symbols. Lost civilization found in India, headlines scream. Archaeologists, who had long thought civilization began in the Middle East, are stunned. How could this exist without us knowing? One asks. At first, scholars can't believe it's real. It must be a colony of Mesopotamia, some say. The seals look a little like Sumerian ones, and there's evidence of trade, so surely the Indus people copied their ideas from the more advanced Sumerians. Others argue it's a later culture, maybe related to the Vedic Aryans. No one wants to believe that a sophisticated civilization could have grown up independently in the Indian subcontinent, but the evidence tells a different story. As more sites are excavated, Shanhu Daro, Lothal, Kalibangan, it becomes clear this was no copy. The Indus Valley had its own unique features. The obsession with standardization, the focus on public health, the lack of royal grandeur, pottery, styles, tool designs, and building techniques all show a clear evolution from earlier villages like Mehrgarh, not sudden adoption of foreign ideas. Then there's the scale. By the 1930s, archaeologists realized the Indus Valley Civilization covered 1.3 million square kilometers larger than Egypt and Mesopotamia combined. This wasn't a small colony. This was a major player in the ancient world, with its own identity, its own genius. The most puzzling thing? The script. Thousands of seals, pottery shards, and tablets are found, covered in symbols, but no one can read them. Unlike Egyptian hieroglyphs or Mesopotamian cuneiform, which were deciphered with the help of bilingual texts, the Indus script has no Rosetta Stone. It remains a mystery, adding to the allure of this forgotten civilization. By the mid-20th century, the truth is undeniable. The Indus Valley Civilization was one of the great early civilizations of the world, and it was homegrown. It had risen, flourished, and fallen long before the Aryans arrived, long before the Vedas were composed. It was a missing piece in the puzzle of human history, a reminder that civilization could take many forms. Today, when you visit Mohenjo-Daro, you can walk along the streets that Banerjee's workers uncovered, peer into the Great Bath, and touch the bricks that once built a city of 35,000 people. The wind blows across the plains, and for a moment, you could almost hear the sounds of that long-lost world, the clatter of potters' wheels, the murmur of traders, the laughter of children chasing each other through the lanes. The rediscovery of the Indus Valley Civilization did more than uncover a few ruins. It shattered assumptions. It showed that ancient civilizations weren't all about kings and conquests, that people could build great cities through cooperation, not war. It reminded us that history is full of surprises, waiting to be dug up by shovels or stumbled upon by railway workers. And the bricks? Some of them still lie beneath the railways of Pakistan and India, supporting trains that carry passengers who rarely think about the ancient hands that shaped them. They are a link between then and now, between a forgotten civilization and the world that finally remembered it. The sun rises again over the Indus plains, but this time it shines on a world that remembers. Modern scholars, armed with shovels, microscopes, and satellite images, have brushed away the dust of 4,000 years to reveal the Indus Valley Civilization not as a curiosity, but as a teacher. Its legacy is written not just in bricks and beads, but in the way we think about cities, cooperation, and our relationship with the planet. To study it is to hear echoes faint, but clear in the clay of our own time. Let's start with the people. For decades, scholars argued that the Indus people vanished, replaced by invading Aryans. But genetic studies tell a different story. DNA from skeletons at Rakhigarhi, the largest Indus city, shows that the people who built Mohenjo-daro in Harappa didn't disappear. They scattered across the subcontinent, mixing with local communities, their genes weaving into the fabric of modern South Asians. The farmer in Punjab, the weaver in Gujarat, the trader in Bangladesh, they all carry fragments of Indus DNA, quiet proof that this civilization didn't end. It transformed like water into mist, then rain, then river again. Continuity lives in small, everyday things. The way a Gujarati farmer plants wheat in neat rows, much like his Indus ancestors. The humped zebu cattle that still graze the plains, sacred as they were 4,000 years ago. The art of spinning cotton, which began here, now thrives in Indian handlooms. Its threads carrying the same skill that first turned fluffy bowls into cloth. Even the game of pachisi, played across South Asia, may trace its roots to the dice and gaming boards found in Indus homes. Some echoes are quiet, but they are there. The cities, too, left their mark. Walk through the old quarters of Lahore or Ahmedabad, and you'll see hints of Indus planning. Narrow lanes that run straight, houses clustered around courtyards, wells shared by neighbors. The grid layout, once revolutionary, became a blueprint for urban design across the subcontinent. In Pakistan's capital, Islamabad, planners consciously echoed the Indus grid, creating wide avenues that intersect at right angles, nod to the ancestors who first tamed chaos with brick and intention. But it's the water that whispers loudest. The Indus people's genius for managing water, their reservoirs, drains, and wells didn't die with their cities. In Rajasthan, farmers still use cadence, earthen dams, to capture rainwater, a technique pioneered at Dhalavira. In Gujarat, the Vav's stepwells that dot the landscape, with their stone steps leading down to cool water, are direct descendants of the wells that dotted Indus streets. These aren't just copies, they're conversations across millennia about how to live with scarcity. What about the lessons? The Indus Valley's greatest gift may be its example of peaceful complexity. For 7 centuries, millions of people lived across 1 million square kilometers without palaces, without armies, without war. They built cities, traded across continents, and raised families not through conquest, but through cooperation. This wasn't naivety, it was wisdom. They understood that trust is cheaper than walls, that shared standards, bricks, weights, beads create more wealth than hoarded treasure, that a well in a neighbor's courtyard keeps your own family safe. Modern societies, torn by conflict and inequality, could learn from this. The Indus people proved that you don't need kings or soldiers to build a great civilization. You need people who agree to play by the same rules, who value the group over the individual, who know that water, once shared, multiplies. Then there's the warning, the echo that hums with urgency. The Indus civilization fell not to enemies, but to a changing climate, a river that dried, monsoons that failed, soil that withered. They adapted as long as they could, digging deeper wells, building more reservoirs, but in the end, no amount of ingenuity could replace the Sarasvati. Their story is a mirror for our time, when glaciers melt and rains grow erratic. It asks, What will we lose if we take our rivers, our rains, our soil for granted? The Indus people didn't have satellites or climate models, but they knew the land. They watched the river, respected the monsoon, and built with humility. We have tools they could never imagine, but do we have their wisdom? Their collapse reminds us that even the most sophisticated civilization is fragile, bound to the earth beneath its feet. And what of the script? Those 400 symbols, still undeciphered, are perhaps the final lesson. Some mysteries are meant to stay. They remind us that history isn't just facts, it's wonder. We may never know the names of the beadmaker in Shanhudaro or the farmer in Harappa, but we know they laughed, worked, loved, and dreamed. In their silence, they speak louder than any text. We were here. We mattered. Today, the Indus Valley is a place of pilgrimage for archaeologists and dreamers. At Mohenjo-daro, children run across the great Bathas steps, their laughter mixing with the wind. At Harappa, a farmer pauses to look at the ruins, then returns to his wheat sowing, as his ancestors did, seeds of the future. At Rakagari, scientists sift through soil, hoping to read the script in DNA and dust. The legacy of the Indus Valley isn't in museums, though the beads and seals there are precious. It's in the idea that civilization can be kind, that cities can nurture, that people can cooperate, that we can live with the earth, not against it. It's a reminder that the past isn't just something to study. It's something to learn. From as you lie down to sleep tonight, think of those Indus streets, straight and true. Think of the drains, carrying waste away so life could thrive. Think of the mother goddess figurine, her arms outstretched, a symbol of care. And listen, can you hear it? The echo of a civilization that built not for kings, but for people. That traded not to conquer, but to connect. That lived for a brief, brilliant moment, in harmony with the river, the rain, and each other. It is a quiet echo, but it is ours to hear.